I have no idea what this game is about, but underneath a few of our Mandalore gaming reactions, I have received suggestions to check out this review and then later on check out Mandalore's full review of the game, which as of the upload of this video will likely be happening next week, so watch out for that. I love learning about new video games and just trying to understand why people enjoy them so much, so I'm really curious to see what I think of this. But of course, as always, this is a reaction video, so make sure to click the link at the very top of the description to go and support the original video by Sseth. Give it a watch first before coming back to watch this reaction, because I'm going to be pausing a lot and trying to examine stuff and whatnot. But with all of that out of the way, let's get right into it.
Hey people, Sseth here.
Hey.
Today, I'll be covering an older CRPG, which still has its own faithful cult following. A game where you...
Of course. CRPGs are a genre that I only got introduced to after starting the YouTube channel. The very first one that I played was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and that was incredible. I genuinely enjoyed my time playing that game, even if some of the systems were a little clunky, and the second game was even better, but unfortunately the playthrough had to end on the channel because my save files got corrupted. It's certainly a genre that has a lot of possibility, but it does require a massive buttload of work in order to make it work out, and obviously requires a pretty heavy time investment from a lot of people, whether that be the player or the developers. So I can kind of understand why it's taken a backseat to other genres of gaming. Thank goodness we have Baldur's Gate 3 though to kind of revive it.
You can greatly expand on your English lexicon, promote Marxism among the impoverished working class orc, and of course have cheap carnal relations with sheep. Arcanum.
What? Excuse me? What? Oftentimes I can't really tell if that's a joke or if that's actually a thing in the game. But what people were saying about this game though, I'm gonna assume yes, it's an actual thing.
Of Steamworks and Magick Obscura. This episode is brought to you by RPG Codex and Bad Dragon, both great gaming websites. Thoroughly recommended. Arcanum takes place in the world of Arcanum. In this fantasy setting, the civilized world is undergoing...
Well, that is a very strange style. What is going on here? Is this like we have technology, but with a mix of magic? Because in usual fantasy settings, technology doesn't really develop very well whenever magic is present, simply because, you know, you can just magic things together. So just judging from the environments, does that mean magic came in later after technology had developed?
Going on industrial revolution, which parallels closely to the industrialization that took place in the 18th century. Complete with orc sweatshops, child labor, and lung cancer for everyone. What a great time to be alive, provided you're not a working class peon with a limited life expectancy. However, there's a problem. This world has magic, and magic doesn't exactly coexist well with technology. Technology in Arcanum is just a broad term for utilization of the natural sciences to do stuff, while magic relies on the violation of these natural principles. Put them together in a system, and everything fucks up. Toss a magical artifact too close to a steam engine, you'll loosen and displace the gears, make the engine run too fast, or make the fuel chamber overpressurize and explode. So
then, what do we do here? Do we go, like, say, a Guilty Gear route, and then we ban the use of technology, or ban the use of magic? Because clearly what we're setting up here is that they can't coexist. Or maybe the whole point of the game is to find a way for them to coexist. I'm still so curious how this industrial revolution happened if we have magic. Or maybe it's a system where like certain people can't use magic, and that's why technology was developed in order to assist them.
Mixing the two is generally a bad idea, and while a lot of people benefit from the increase in tech, some are extremely salty about it. Spells and shit don't work near industrial cities. Healing and resurrecting people by waving your hands no longer does anything. You instead have to rely on barbaric practices like medicine and surgery. Maybe they'll even start demanding you to be a licensed professional, whatever that means. Back in Uganda, you could freely practice sorcery and trepanning with just an associate's degree in witchcraft.
So essentially what's going on here are the people who have magic think they're super magic special and that people should praise them for their ability with magic. However, technology kind of stunts that and kind of takes, or well, puts them in the back seat, which would obviously cause a rift and conflict between those who can magic and those who technology.
Everything about this changing world comes together over the course of the story, in which you can play a single, fully customized character. There's a huge variety of options for design.
Carry weight 4,500? What are the values of the stuff that you can carry? AC adjustment -3? If that's a armor class, that's a yikes. And what's a reaction modifier?
Designing your own character, which are determined by race. In no particular order, these are humans, proud, noble, and forward-thinking when it comes to tech. Elves, proud, noble, but regressive Luddites that hate tech. They live in the forests and chew on bamboo. Dwarves, similar to elves, just shorter with fatter. Half-elves, products. Half-orcs, products.
What the frick?
Half-ogres, products of systemic. And of course, gnomes, the products of polygamy.
Oh my god.
It is no exaggeration or hyperbole that all...
Well, apologies if a lot of that had to be cut out. YouTube has become a very different place. And Seth back at it again with his darker humor. Hasn't changed much over the years, has he?
evils of the world are endorsed and committed by gnomes. A gnome feels no empathy nor remorse, no common humanity that separates us from simple beasts. The only love a gnome can feel, if you dare describe it so, is that for money. A gnome would sooner sell his own mother for a pouch of silvers than do a single good deed in his entire gaping hole of an existence.
What is this gnome hate? What did they do? I don't know if this is a meme or if this is like a lore thing that you learn later on, that the gnomes are just despicable.
You also select your background and upbringing, which can range from being voluptuously lewd and beautiful to being born as a mentally stunted, special needs child. The story goes that you board the first Zeppelin ever made in this world, the IFS Zephyr, on its maiden voyage across the continent.
Is this an actual cutscene from the game? It's a pretty cool style, kind of mimicking old film.
Which gets shot down by orcs flying fighter planes, who are later identified as brothers Jihad al-Nuri and Hussam al-Muradi. The orcs aren't very good at
I don't think that's what their names were, sir.
flying, so the attack turns into a, or as we refer to it in Arcanum, an isolated incident. Anyway, these orcs commit two isolated incidents, which result in the Zeppelin exploding and killing everyone aboard. Except you.
Lovely.
You live. Then, a gnome dying in the wreck.
What? This always happens, man. I guess at least this time, the ship doesn't break and then you end up washed up on shore. It's an airship this time, and that's why it's different.
Package asks you to deliver a ring back to its rightful owner, with your only clue being the manufacturing signature of the company that made it. This sets off a chain of events and an unfolding conspiracy against not only the modernized world, but the entire living world itself. The first time I played this game many years back, I had no idea what I was doing, but it turned out I knew exactly what I was doing. Arcanum is one of the rare games out there where playing a pure charisma build is not only viable, it's optimal. With every 3 points of charisma, your character can recruit an additional NPC into the party. By endgame, I did not have a party. I had a fucking army, and because my charisma was so high, I pretty much talked my way out of any encounter.
Hey, I mean, that sounds good to me. Whenever there's a paladin option, I always love playing them, so charisma being a very useful stat just is a definite positive for me. And I feel like it's just more interesting whenever you get into some sort of scuffle to find a way to talk yourself out of it rather than to fight the enemy. But of course, that's different for everybody.
So, I got to the end of the game, met the final antagonist, and I was ready to beat him with my squad of goons. Except that didn't happen. In the end, you and the final antagonist talk it out. He explains his philosophy that he views life as unnatural and that the very act of living and existence is in and of itself suffering, that he'd rather eliminate it out of mercy to prevent further suffering.
This is one of those moments where you don't want to agree with the villain, but then you're like, he's kind of got a point. I think it's undeniable that existence is suffering. Like, bad things are going to happen to you. You can't really control your body, as in like, you can't just say, no, I don't want to eat, and then never have to eat ever again, right? But if you're Buddhist like me, then you probably believe in breaking the cycle of like life and rebirth. And that's essentially the gist of reaching nirvana. However, I'm not an extremely religious person. So to me, those teachings kind of mean, while yes, suffering does exist, it doesn't mean that you have to inflict it upon others, and you can just live life in the present to the absolute best of your abilities. Suffering is inevitable, but that doesn't mean you're going to be suffering forever. Without that, then there wouldn't be any good moments, no happiness, and no joy. But I've always found it fascinating how villains and heroes essentially have the same backstory but just have a different reaction to it. So depending on how well written this villain could be, they might have experienced a pain in the past, or simply just the unfairness of the world and decided, you know what, I gotta end it all. Whereas a hero in that situation might decide like, you know what, I never want anyone else to experience this kind of pain ever again. Or like, how can I solve this issue that I have an issue with? Maybe there's some magic hocus pocus thing that we can do to fix this without defeating the main villain here, which I think could be a good departure from your usual story. But I don't know. We'll see.
Being born into this world, you then make the argument that life and existence does have merit, that his personal experience and confinement have poisoned his worldview and made him jaded, and remarkably, he agrees, but he also states that his mind is so warped with hatred that you can't just leave him alive. So, you offer him an alternative, voluntary. And he takes it. Arcanum, the game where you can convince the final antagonist himself out of love for the world he hates. There's very few.
That is a very powerful line, and also something that I think is possible in Baldur's Gate as well. This is also kind of why I enjoy conversation rather than straight up action and fighting when you're trying to deal with an enemy. It can lead to interesting situations like this, leaving you with a much more complex emotion about the whole thing. And to some people, they may say that like, oh, anybody can be redeemed, so maybe we didn't have to do that, but I feel like there's always a certain point where people just know that they've gone too far, and that even if they were to survive or try to repent, they would never be able to repay all the stuff that they've done. Of course, it's somewhat of an invisible threshold, so like, who's to say and who's to determine this? In this scenario, though, it's kind of what the villain wanted, so I guess all we can do is just grant it to him. Unless if there's an alternative path to that. Don't really know how intricate this CRPG gets.
Few other RPGs with a plot as strong as Arcanum's, and it changes depending on your character. This time around, I played an autistic dwarf. While previously everyone was quite friendly to me as a well-spoken human, most townspeople now tell me that manlets aren't welcome in these parts.
Bug
Even
off.
renting a bed was suddenly more expensive, as the innkeeper remarks that he'll probably have to spend more time cleaning out the lice and dingleberries left by my filthy, unshaven body. A good example of just how intricate Arcanum's dialogue can be is booking a ticket for the railways. It's a three-step process of declaring whether or not you have magical artifacts, practice wizardry, or possess elementals in your company that could dangerously accelerate and derail the steam locomotive if you're
That is actually really detailed, kind of funny. Maybe a little bit annoying to click through, but also very realistic for the world that they live in. Obviously, it's a fantasy world, so there's a whole lot of non-realism going on, but it's nice that they thought about this.
Clean of a supernatural, you get to ride first class close to the machinery, while wizards, to put it bluntly, ride the back of a bus for everyone's safety. And if you lie about it, the conductor will find out, and your paid tickets will be null and void. The gameplay itself, though, a mixed bag. Combat's not exactly thrilling. They also introduced critical failure as a fun gameplay mechanic, just in case you were planning to accidentally decapitate yourself with your own elephant gun. You can choose between real time and...
Oh my god. What is this Skaven tactics, man? So, for those of you who don't know too much about the Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop, I learned that the Skaven, which are like a race of massive rats that use very high-tech machinery, like miniguns and stuff like that. On tabletop, they always have a chance to roll poorly, and then the weapon that they're currently using kind of explodes in their hand and deals damage to them. Or probably just outright kills them. It's basically exactly this situation, but I was not expecting it to be in the CRPG.
And turn-based combat, depending on which of those you can better exploit. Casting spells in real time is based on how fast you can click the mouse. Ranged attacks also become insanely fucking fast in real time, but this is more lethal to you than your adversaries. If you meet an enemy archer later in the game, he can kill your entire party before you even see him. There's also enemies out there that damage your weapons when you hit them, but damage your armor when they hit you. Thanks, Troika. For this reason, the best companion in the game is a stray dog, which you find after saving it from being kicked to death by a gnome. And by saving, I mean gutting the gnome like a fish. The authorities won't even care.
So that's why we hate gnomes. I understand it now.
They might even thank you for making the streets safer at night. I learned that a dog's teeth can somehow survive biting rocks and crystals, while the highest quality steel gets shattered from smacking windows and furniture. The AI in this game is fantastic. NPCs can't establish causality between events. Amazingly, NPCs will be more alarmed to see you prowling around than hearing a set of dynamite charges detonating their bedroom. Sneaking is completely broken. Even with mastery, you can be spotted miles away. So, if you want to break into someone's house, a safer way to do it is break their windows while they're not looking with a stealthy weapon, such as a shotgun, and then wait for them to sleep. NPCs are very deep sleepers, and they don't give a shit how much noise you're making. Clunking around in full plate mail, looting all of their belongings, stealing from them is completely risk-free. You can even use their own gold to finance purchases from their own store. The game has a very interesting color palette of gray and brown, and sometimes green if you're lucky enough to be in a forest. The UI is also gray and brown. It's not ugly by any means. I'm just saying that if ARCANUM was a woman, it would be a very plain, dog-faced woman. But you're already married to her, so you learn to accept it and move on. It doesn't help that ARCANUM's soundtrack is quite moody and melancholic. If I could describe it, it would be like the mental orchestra that plays inside a child worker's head as he attempts to carefully dislodge cotton from running machines, hoping and praying that his hand doesn't get amputated while reaching between the spinning gears.
You know what? I know it's a joke, but I can vividly imagine that being the soundtrack for a scene like this in a movie. From what we've heard, probably nothing to write home about, but OSTs are meant to be fitting to the atmosphere.
I just turn off the music and switch it with something more soothing from another RPG. Much better. Traveling through the world map is done by plotting waypoints and works exactly the same as Fallout 1 and 2. Luckily, there's no urgency.
I see. The first Fallout game I've ever played is Fallout New Vegas, which we're currently streaming here on the channel. And I do know that Fallout 1 and 2 are very different because they are CRPGs. I was going to comment at the beginning that the kind of camera angle and stuff reminded me of some screenshots I've seen of those games, Fallout 1 and 2, but I haven't played them yet, so I wasn't too sure. Maybe I was thinking of something else. And also, not gonna lie, when I saw this map and this like mountain range within this style, I immediately thought of Myth.
So you don't have to worry about racing across the map to finish the main quest. You're very free to travel and encounter quests in any order. ARCANUM also lets you plot waypoints inside of the map as well, which is really handy to help you navigate huge cities and reduce the pain of backtracking. You could also just be a mage and learn how to teleport. There's a lot of schools of magic, and they're not essentially all equal, and that's because the necromancy school exists. At level 1, it lets you cast Harm, and Harm is the strongest spell in the game, but it will fuck up your index finger real fast. Power comes at a price. More interestingly, you could also get Conjure Spirit from the same tree. What if I told you someone decided it was a great idea to write a fuck ton of dialogue around a single spell? Because that's exactly what they did. Conjure Spirit lets you summon the souls of minor and major plot characters as long as you can find their body, and then you can interrogate them for clues, advice, and information that
oh my god. That is so freaking cool. I love it when games go out of their way to do all of this stuff that the majority of their player base may never see, but the amount of effort put into it is very appreciated. What this is making me think of is a similar situation to like Trails in the Sky. So far, I played the first one and second chapter, and they all have chests whenever you go up to a chest that you've already opened. There's a unique dialogue in every single one. Why do they have it? I don't know. Does it serve any kind of like story purpose? Well, not really, but it's a little bit of funny text every now and then that you get to read whenever you find a chest that it kind of adds to the reward. I've never seen any other game do something like that, but I suppose in this situation it's pretty similar. Just obviously it's not a chest, but a human soul.
Normally you'd never get. I talk a bunch about magic. What about technology? Well, with technology, you get schematics that you can craft and manufacture if you've got the scientific aptitude. And that's about it. You can make anything from Molotovs, dynamite, cocaine, flamethrowers, tranquilizer darts, to even mechanized arachnids. There's a lot of schematics to purchase and obtain, and the crafting system is cool. A lot of fun. Unfortunately, some of the components are extremely rare and only spawn about 10% of the time at inventor shops, making it very difficult to build an
RNG spawns. That's a yikes. Although I guess that's always been a staple of gaming. I wasn't really playing video games seriously during the era this game came out in, or like even the era after this. So a lot of this stuff I'm like, oh, I'm enjoying the quality of life stuff that we have in more modern games. But whenever this happens, I try to look at it from like the perspective of somebody who just like got the game and this is like the newfangled thing. I think it would be a lot of fun, even if there may be some annoyances here and there. Just something to spend a ton of your time in. Of course, if the game is good. If it's not, then there's really no point.
Army of steam-powered robots. But if you somehow do figure it out, tell me, because they don't count to your party limit, so they're potentially infinite. Key bindings can't be remapped, and there's a lot of them, so please check the manual to see all the keys. Speaking of a manual, the ARCANUM game manual is fantastic, and probably one of the best I've ever read.
Wait,
the whole thing is about 180
how long is
pages.
This? What the... Oh my goodness. And this is yet another forgotten relic of the past, where a lot of the video game's lore would be relegated to a manual. Here's all the stuff that you need to know about the entirety of the world. Read this novel. I wonder what it felt like to buy a video game and receive the manual alongside it and open it and read about this universe that you're going to delve into. Because like nowadays, obviously a video game wants to be able to convey everything through the story within the game itself without having to rely on third-party stuff. Unfortunately, not all games are able to achieve this, but ideally that's what they want to go for. And when it works, it feels really good. But this one also has a certain charm to it that I can't really describe nor fully appreciate because I wasn't there. The nerd inside of me though, or actually scratch that, I'm just straight up a nerd. It's kind of screaming that, you know, this might be pretty cool.
Explaining you the lore, the setting, and the races of this world, and illustrating the dilemma between magic and technology. It's even got a fucking banana bread recipe in there.
Yo, banana bread! Oh, man. I am an enjoyer of banana bread, yes. I kind of like it a lot. But that's really cool. Like, this is supposed to be some sort of in-universe recipe, but you can just make it yourself and they give you the recipe. I don't know if it's gonna taste any good, but like, that's pretty neat. I don't know what else to say. You're not gonna see anything like this in a modern game, that's for sure. Or maybe you do, and I just haven't really played any cooking games. But I wouldn't really describe this game as a cooking game. Another thing that I forgot to mention though is that, well, we kind of had evidence of this earlier with like all the lines with the summon spirit spell. But 187-page manual, even a blind person could probably tell that the devs were incredibly invested in this game. That they had a world to build, a story to tell, and they put everything that they could into it. It's really cool to see.
At the end, I tried it. It was pretty good. So for once, please read the manual. It's great. My only word of warning, this game can't run on modern systems. So if you install the good old games copy, you'll have to run it using safe mode. Final score, good out of very. ARCANUM. It's a great game. Very dated by modern standards, but the writing, the plot, and the dialogue keep it fresh. Buy it, play it. It's super cheap on sale, and you'll easily sink several dozen hours into it.
Why is it always the old video games that get all like the cool dialogue and story and innovative ideas that we've just kind of thrown to the wayside because, you know, we got to reach our deadlines. Games graphics have to be good, but the story we can just put on the side. It's like, well, I guess there's the part of like development cycles just become so much more expensive and therefore they can't really let the game have time to cook, but It's just so unfortunate. Like, whatever happened to the Knights of the Old Republic remake? I don't think that thing is ever going to come out. I think that project is dead. Last I heard of it, I think there was like only 2 people working on it or something. Or, you know, like a Dawn of War modern remake of it with some quality of life updates, but, you know, the same gameplay from the first game. That would be epic. And I've only played it twice. I think the game is amazing. And that would be a very instant cash grab, but, you know, maybe it's an IP thing. Who knows?
And remember, a good gnome is a dead gnome. Also, I now have another channel. This is a backup channel, just in case anything goes wrong. Please subscribe, you won't regret it. Long story short, it is the opinion of a Merchants Guild that my channel is the target of an anti-Semitic attack by extremists who hate Israel that are taking time to mass flag each video. I know, it's annoying, but let's make the best of it. And as always, more...
That is, the annoying part of being on YouTube. This channel is also currently experiencing something similar to that when it comes to like false copyright claims. It's to the point where I just have like a copy paste form, and every single time I make a dispute, they kind of have to release it because they don't have any evidence of owning the thing that's supposed to be copyright free and wasn't made by them. But you know, they can just do that, and YouTube does no protection to their creators. This video was like 6 years ago though. Hopefully things like this aren't happening to Sseth any longer, but I also feel like all the big channels just deal with it. But of course they never tell anybody else because, well, it's just how it is. There can be some pretty intricate game plots, and there can also be some incredibly wacky characters within those games, but nothing will be as confusing as human beings, at least in my opinion. Like, who in their right mind has the time to go out of their way to do any of this? For what reason? And for absolutely no gain, apart from just being annoying.
More content to come, so stay tuned. A warm thanks to the many members of the Merchants Guild, generously funding and bankrolling these videos. You're all truly wonderful. Have a good one.
So that was Arcanum. Honestly, a really intriguing game with a cool premise that I've never seen before. Although granted, I just haven't played enough games yet probably. And I think like the Magick steampunk vibe thing has been done, but perhaps not quite like this. The setup itself makes me want to get more invested in the world and learn more about the lore of like how exactly things came to be and what the in-universe perspective for people who maybe use magic, maybe people who can't use it, and why their ideas kind of clash here and there, and if there's any kind of resolution that they could come to. Or like, what was the origins of the villain that we convinced here? What was going on there? Could there be more to the story? There probably likely is, but you know, you'd have to play the game yourself in order to figure that out. I think this is great, and I can understand why there's a cult following around this one. But yeah, honestly, this is kind of perfect, with Seth's review kind of making me more interested in it, and we'll go and check out Mandler's review next week in order to do a deeper dive into the details of the game. So yeah, that's going to be it from me, my dudes. Once again, make sure to go support Sseth for the awesome review. Link at the very top of the description, as always. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.